Hey guys, here's a natural daily canine supplement I wanted to tell you about. It's New Vet Plus. Strengthens the immune system, promotes healthy skin and coat, supports healthy eyes and ears, is safe for all pets of all ages, and it maximizes the quality of life. Use my code 902828. Follow. Hey guys, if you need raw dog food anywhere in the United States, be sure to visit our friends over at texastripe.com.
Welcome to NWA Connie Corso's podcast, where we talk all things dogs.
Vito is back in the house. It's been a while, my friend. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. How you been? I've been watching a lot of your stuff.
Oh yeah. We've been busy and everything. Well, we're glad to have you back. It's been a minute. Today we're going to talk specifically on the history of the Black American Bulldog.
Yeah, I've done one or two before, but I don't know. They never put it up as Black American Bulldog. They just put it up as American Bulldog history. And I don't think I want to do it because I'm directly involved in the Black American Bulldogs. Dogs that I produced like in 2006 kind of popularized the heavy colored bully type American Bulldogs. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many comments I see, and even people that breed them, I see them do interviews or they're discussing stuff, and they kind of quote stuff that's not true about the breed. So I just want to give a brief history going all the way back. The first thing I think people should know is, there's a lot of people out there they think they're purists, and they're like, American Bulldogs, the only color they should come in is mainly white. Well, first, you have to understand white isn't a color in dogs. White is the result of a gene. They call it the white spotting gene, or they call it piebald. Mm-hmm. So if you get a dog that just has white feet, a little star, maybe a little blaze, it's called Irish watermarks. That's what we always used to call them. And then if they have more, where it's like big cow patches of color on a white dog, that's piebald. And then if you have extreme piebald, that is where there's barely no color, like a Doggo Argentina is an extreme piebald, but he's a color up underneath there. He's a color. He's some colors, just the color's blocked out. Right. So when it blocks it out, it removes the pigment from the hair and the skin. And in the extreme dogs that are bred piebald for a long time, the pigment can be removed from the eardrum, which causes deafness, or it can be removed from the eye, which causes a blue eye or a glass eye, and sometimes that can cause that to be limited sighting or completely blind. So it's a pigment. White is the absence of pigment. Mm-hmm. And the old timers used to tell me, because some American Bulldogs, you get them wet and you see they have all these black spots on their skin.
Right.
And a lot of the old timers are like, you need that, or they'll have skin issues, which is true, because if you breed white to white and you don't have any pigment even on the skin under the hair, they're very sensitive. They sunburn, they have just a real sensitive fur and skin. So First of all, white is not a color. White is a coat pattern called piebald.
Right.
Going back, the two people that got the breed registered was John D. Johnson, who's deceased, and Alan Scott, who's still alive. Alan Scott I'm not sure, but I think he's in the 70s.
Okay.
So Alan Scott and his kennel is Owl Hollow Kennels. And then there's a guy that's his friend, Don Matthews, who he just turned 80, which I was shocked. I didn't think he was that much older than me, but his kennel is Confederate Kennels, and they both have black dogs. Alan Scott, like I said, he's the oldest. If you're wanting to know breed history, he's been around the longest of anybody I know alive, him and Don Matthews. So he had said back in the day, the first black dogs he ever saw or heavy colored dogs he ever saw were on John D. Johnson's yard. And then he came out with, there's a dog called Sandman the Great, who is kind of a foundation dog, definitely a foundation dog for Johnson's bloodline. His father was a catch dog called Mac the Masher, who was colored up with just a white head and white feet, and the rest was like black brindle. But there was never a picture of the mother of Sandman the Great. Well, Alan Scott says his mother was solid gray brindle, and she came from a litter where he said he knew all the dogs in that litter, and there were several black dogs in there. So he'd had black dogs. I think one of the pictures I sent you was him as a kid. It's like a 50-year-old picture of him with a dog he had called Dixie Blackjack, who's a Black American Bulldog. And so Alan Scott's had black dogs since inception of the breed. They weren't common, they weren't the main thing. A lot of them were heavy white, but some of them were red and some were brindle. And the heavy colored dogs, for some reason in the Johnson line, he selected away from it, or somehow it just didn't, he didn't have dogs that he kept that had that. And then he outcrossed I'm pretty sure he outcrossed a St. Bernard, which is a piebald breed. They come with heavy color, but usually they're a type of piebald. And in the 70s, he put an English Bulldog in, West Champs High Hopes. In the old days, the first English Bulldog was a heavy colored dog called King Dick. He was a solid, I don't know if he was black or if he was heavy fawn color with a black mask, because there's no pictures back then. There were just paintings of him. So the English Bulldog breed is pretty much selected away from any heavy colored, although they still get them. The heavy colored dogs and the black dogs, piebald was what was, selected for.
Okay.
So in the beginning, Johnson and Scott started registering the breed. The breed had been in the United States for years, but it wasn't bred the way modern breeds are. There wasn't paperwork. There wasn't lineage on every dog. There could have been, but it was just like Bob and John's family bred them for a while, and it was, they're hunting dogs and farm dogs and working dogs, and people that use working dogs, we're not like exclusive kennels from noble origin. They use what worked. And so if the dog down the street was 3/4 bulldog or half bulldog, and he was half, a quarter Chihuahua, and he could do the job, he got bred, he got used.
Right.
And if he produced dogs that were good, those dogs got used. If you produced garbage, they did get used. And that's how all breeds of dogs started. So
yeah.
So
since I've been doing this, I'm always catching the similarities in all dog breeds. All these stories are very similar.
I don't know. Like I told you before, I don't know Cane Corso history, but I can guarantee you it's probably similar. Same with Prescanier. Same with Borbal. Same with every breed of dog. It's just that dogs that we're used to, like boxers and Dobermans and German Shepherds, they morphed many years earlier, and we just don't know about it. But the whole idea where these people are like, my dog's pure, I have the paperwork, 10, 15, 20 generations, or I've got a title, I've got a show title, I've got a health test, and my dog's pure. That's part of the problem with the breed of purebred dogs having all these problems, is because they're bred on the paperwork or the idea, and the idea is faulty, because any working type dog for thousands of years, the first and really first and almost only criteria was for purity was work. So anyway, that's a sideline. The Black American Bulldogs, there's like three different kind of paths of where they came. Alan Scott is probably the oldest one. He didn't select for it, so he bred that blackjack dog. And the only dog I can find, well, there's a couple dogs that came down from him, granddaughters. One of them Alan Scott used, called Sophie, who was white dog, and I'm not sure what color her little color was. And then there was a sister to her called Pistol, that was almost solid red, colored kind of like a boxer. But there were other dogs and other routes where they came through, but it wasn't it wasn't really a common thing. Besides that, the oldest, there was a guy in Pennsylvania called James Ellerby. I spoke to him a couple times, and I even spoke to Johnson about it, because turns out Johnson was the guy that got his black dogs registered. And they weren't like part of any 7/8 rule or anything like that. He's just like, oh, you found a black dog? Okay, register his dog as an American Bulldog. But James Ellerby is a real interesting character. He passed away. He grew up in North Carolina, I believe, he told me. And when he was a little kid, and he said these bulldogs, these big white bulldogs, some of them had ears cut, some of them had their tails cut. The guy with the general store in his town sold them. And so he always wanted one. He was always like me. He was like a crazy for dogs, And the guy that lived across the street, he told me he had a turkey ranch. And I remember he'd tell me the guy's name was Brock. And he had a big white bulldog called Brock. And he said when he was a little kid, he didn't know any better, but he grabbed Brock and brought him to his house and, petted him. And he was being friendly. And his dad came up and said, no, you got to take that dog back. That's Mr. Brock's dog. And so anyway, his father died when he was like, I think 8 or 9. So his mom and the family had to move back to where his mom was from, which was Pennsylvania. And so he grew up in the city in Pennsylvania, but he always was crazy about bulldogs. And he used to send money back, he said, and to the family and try to get dogs, but nobody ever found any or did anything. And then he discovered Dave Levitt, when Dave Levitt just started his project for the Old English Bulldog. And he owned some of those dogs. Like Dave Levitt had placed dogs with him. And then they had a falling out over some female that died, something about when she was giving birth. And it was a bull mastiff English bulldog pit bull cross that he started with. But meanwhile, he went to Dave Levitt's house, and he saw a white bulldog from his youth that he'd been looking for all those years. And he goes, oh my God, you've got one of them. Where'd you get it? And he goes, oh, I leased it from a guy in Georgia, John D. Johnson. She's a dog that some people had up here from him that grew allergic to her. So I'm going to breed her. Her name was Georgia Gal, and she turned out to be the first sugar doll. She was a daughter of the Dick the Bruiser, which was another foundation dog. So after he fell out with Dave Levitt, he called John D. Johnson and started buying dogs from him. And he got some pretty noteworthy dogs. He had this gigantic monster dog called King's Bruiser Bow VI. And anyway, so he was into the American Bulldogs, and he had talked, him and Johnson really loved each other. They respected each other a lot. And, Johnson was a nice guy, real personable guy. And James Ellerby was just a sweet, nice person, very kind, well-spoken guy. And so they got along great. And I don't know what came first, but he said, I'd like to breed a black bulldog. Because Johnson even said, yeah, I had black. I had a real nice black female. I hadn't had one for a while, and she died. And so Ellerby, somehow in the course of action, had found somebody that had a black dog that was part, he said he was told it was half pit bull, half Labrador. Now people that mess with that blood think it was probably a Neo, because it was being fought in the city in I guess Pittsburgh, and it had lost, and it was going to get put down. And Ellerby said, no, I'll take it. So he took it, and Johnson helped him get it registered. That dog's name was Champagne. And so he bred it into his Johnson dogs and produced a Champagne 2 and a dog called Muscles that he sold to another American Bulldog guy up there called Dave Farnetti. So anyway, some of that blood was lost. Like if you don't select black, you'll lose it, because if you don't select the non-brindle black, you got red. And if you get red's recessive. So recessive, some people don't realize what that means that dog's color that it can contribute when it's bred is only red. It can't throw brindle and it can't throw black. It can only carry red. So if you get a fawn dog and you breed a fawn dog to a fawn dog, or red dog to a red dog, the whole litter's going to be red. You know,
yeah.
There's.
Let me ask you this, Vito. Is the red considered to be in the fawn family?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I say red, I mean brown, fawn, anything that's not brindle, brownish, reddish color.
Right.
Even buckskin, all that's the same. It's just all that is different shades of sabling.
Right.
You know, some dogs have a really rich, kind of orangey, red, rusty.
Yeah.
That just means their hair has a little more black tip to it.
Okay.
And then if a dog doesn't have that, it doesn't have that black tip, and it has a different, little less pigment. So that's why you have variations in red.
So
but when I say red,
it would go to red all the way to Farmentino being the more recessive color, you think?
I don't know how that works in the shades, but all non-brindle red, fawn, red, brown is recessive. And people get confused. They're like, oh, it's dominant because I bred a red dog to a red dog and I only get a red dog. Well, that means you got two recessives. Two recessives means that they don't carry any other color, just that red, and that's why you get 100% red. Same goes with like a chocolate red nose. If you breed two red nose dogs together, that's two dilute recessives, and you're just going to get recessive. Now, brindle is dominant, which that means it can carry red, it can carry black, it can carry anything, and it can throw brindle too. Right. So when it's bred, it can contribute brindle, or if it carries that, it can contribute the red. So when you're doing black, it's and you don't select for the black, you've lost it. Unless you select for brindle, it can be carried through brindle. So Ellerby, he was in and out. He kept telling me, they keep going back to white, So that he just kept getting more and more pied colored dogs. He sold the dog to a guy who's an old-time breeder too, Doug Kennedy in Michigan. His first dog he ever bought was from James Ellerby. It was a black female called Black Mamba. And he used her to start. He got totally different Johnson blood after that and intermingled it. And so he produced it. But back in the day, solid colored Johnson type dogs that weren't white with patches were, people just automatically assume you're crossing a pit bull in there, you cross something in. So whereas on the standard side, it wasn't like that. On the standard side, there was a lot of buckskin, solid brindle, reds, all kinds of reds. It was a different mindset. The guys that were breeding the standard dogs early on, there was a group of them, they used to call themselves the standard performance American Bulldogs. They didn't breed, they were kind of mirroring game bred pit bull breeders. And some of them would say they do a game test, a roll, or whatever. There's rumors about that. I'm sure some of them did. Some of them, it was probably bullshit. I don't know. But the character of the dog, the gameness, that was the number one thing for them. So they didn't care if it was red. They didn't care if it was purple. It all depended on the ability and the gameness of the dog or the grit. So in performance lines, there's tons of solid colored dogs, and they either come out solid, heavy red, heavy brindle, or they come out heavy white. And their pieballs, I don't know, for some reason, weren't the big saddle back, big patches. They were mainly almost all white or all heavy colored. So Doug Kennedy got those, and of course, he similar to when I got into the blacks. You get a solid heavy black colored dog or heavy red colored dog, you'd probably sell it as a pet with no papers, which is kind of what I did. But it was carried in throughout Kennedy's line because he had brindle dogs, and brindle will carry the black. And his color kind of caught on later through somebody else that had a black dog, a black patch dog, and him and this other breeder started selecting for the heavy colored black. But I'll tell you that a little bit later. So that's the oldest. The second oldest is probably, there's a guy, like I told you, there's performance standard American Bulldogs in the 80s. There used to be even a registry called the Game Bred American Bulldog Registry and Club. And there were names like Joe Painter, Mike Margentina, Steve LeClaire, Larry Cora, Roadhog Kennels. There's a bunch of these guys, and they were breeding purely on performance and gameness and grit. And so there was a guy called Weaver. His last name was Weaver. And he had some of these standard performance dogs. He was in the military, and he went to buy a dog from Boudreaux, an Eli Pit Bull from Boudreaux down in Louisiana. And he bought a female called Zydeco Dancer. And she was a black, pure American Pit Bull Terrier off of a dog called Maverick, Champion Maverick. And Eli dogs were known for being sometimes were a little bit bigger sized, more catch weight pits. So anyway, he got that, and him and this other guy called John Lickhart, I don't know who got the idea, if they came up with it together, they decided to try doing an outcross, do a blend of the Pit Bull with these performance American Bulldogs, which all American Bulldogs have some pit or the same breeds that went into the pit from, I don't know if you could go, nobody knows for sure, but if you went back 200 years ago when they're importing fighting dogs and bull baiting dogs, they went into the game bred American Pit Bull Terrier. And it's my belief that the American Bulldog is kind of an offshoot of the American Pit Bull Terrier. Possibly, there's definitely other things in there too, but when they got a dog that was too big or not quite game enough, they may have given it to a rancher or a hog hunter. That turned into these dogs. And if you look, a lot of the early pit bulls were pied, heavy pied.
Yes.
Most of the dogs from England were piebald dogs.
Right.
The Irish dogs tended to be heavier colored, but they were smaller, more terrier type usually. But so like Little Rascals Petey, he looks more like an American Bulldog now than he does a pit bull today, I think. And a lot of the early foundation dogs were Kager and Stampinato. A lot of different dogs were white, mainly white. So anyway, those guys did this breeding. John Lickhart used to say his synthetic line. Back then it was allowed, the NKC allowed, they had a 7/8 rule. And the 7/8 rule meant that you could outcross to a different breed, but you can't get registered until they're 7/8 American Bulldog. So that's what he did with that line. He had a really nice dog called Jedi that was black and white male. And then he kept daughters and line bred them. And those dogs got integrated into the standard performance American Bulldogs. And later, Don Matthews, like I was saying, he got some of those dogs from John Lickhart. And he bred them how he saw fit and created his own kind of line of game bred, or not game bred, of performance black dogs. He called them hybrids, but they weren't really hybrids by then. They were 7/8 or better. And he gave a little interview that I think confuses people a lot, confused me a little bit at first, but he evidently, it wasn't publicized, I guess, but he also took, with creating his line of black dogs, he bred to an Amstaff that was like a sports titled dog. I don't know if it was PSA titled or Schutzhund titled dog. And he bred that to what he called a bully hybrid American Bulldog. And that kind of went into his line. And today, he's well known for his black dogs. Even Alan Scott's bred to some of those dogs too. So that's the second way that black American Bulldogs came about. And the third is where I kind of started. Back in 1999, I bought a dog from upstate New York from a guy called Gail Raponi. At that time, he just bred American Bulldogs, I believe. And he had dogs kind of down off of this other kennel called Aspen Rare. Aspen Rare started with dogs from a guy in Texas called Bill Heinz. Bill Heinz were basically, they're mainly white type, hog dog type dogs. And he crossed them. He had different outcrosses that he did. Well, this female I got from Gail Raponi, she was white and black. And I bought her because I'd seen, I think they advertised in the back of Dog World back then. And he had a dog called Badger, and a dog called Panda. They were brothers. Big, like 110-pound, really thick-looking dogs, but they had more of a muzzle like a standard dog, but they were big and thick. And they were doing hang time and all this bite work and all this stuff. And I thought, wow, those are cool. I didn't care that much about the color. I thought it was kind of cool. So I called them, and I'm talking to him about shipping me semen, blah, blah, blah. Well, I could tell right away. He didn't ever do it before. And I thought, I'm not going to pay all this money and, to ship semen. And he said, hey, I got a daughter. I'll sell you. So I bought this female called Dinah, she had like cow patch, black and white. And she was from a dog from Alan Scott called Candy, and a dog called Badger. And Badger was black and white. And he came off of the Heinz blood. And there was a dog, a couple generations in his background called Aslan. Aslan, I noticed him like in 1995 at a show. I saw a video of a show. I wasn't there. And he was a real cool looking, thick, black dog. Like his whole back was black and everything else was white. And he had patches on his face. And I contacted the guy to try to figure out what the heck, because I couldn't make heads or tails out of his pedigree. It said his father went back to something, but there was no pictures. I couldn't see exactly where the black came from. And back then the guy didn't know me from Adam. So he's like, he's a great dog. His dad was black. So I just left it at that. And I had bought the dog and I bred her as an outcross. Back then I started doing outcrosses because I was trying to clean up the breathing. That's something.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. Yeah.
It's primarily most of my breedings the last 20 years. Well, I had already outcrossed to a little bit of this other blood that's totally unrelated called the Man of War blood. There was a real well-known working dog called Vader Red. Back then, I remember even seeing it myself and thinking, that just looks like a gigantic red pit bull, which it's kind of a mystery as to what exactly the bloodline, where it came from. They're out of Louisiana. There was this a wrestling coach called Doc. Pete, his name was Pete, but they called him Doc. And he had that line of dogs. They either come in white or heavy colored brindle or red. And they're known to be pretty gamey and pretty gritty, super excellent catch dogs. And most of them that I saw had just wonderful temperaments with kids and people. But they could do anything. And there was that dog Vader Red, that did a lot of stuff. And a lot of people in the performance dogs bred to him because he was a good working dog. Well, anyway, that was the first outcross I did. I had a friend in Mississippi He's long been dead now, Jack Robinson. And Jack Robinson started with those man of war dogs. So he was used to having solid brindle dogs next to white dogs and even red dogs. And I had a huge dog, and he had the uncle to my dog. So we kind of talked a little bit because of that. And he'd taken that uncle of my dog, which was 3/4 Johnson, 1/4 Painter, this big, huge dog called Okie. And he started breeding it to all those man of war females. And it produced these freaking monster dogs, huge. He produced this dog called Bigfoot that was like 135 pounds.
Wow.
And had crazy thick, he was only like 25 inches tall.
Yeah.
He had crazy bone. Like I'd never seen bone on an American Bulldog like that. And he had a weird head, kind of a Mastiff he had, that had a little bump on his muzzle, like a little hump.
Yeah.
I'd seen that before. And I'd gone down there and seen him because I bred to him. And he was great with people, super stable. But he had some absolute, like if any dog challenged him or did anything, Jack used to tell me, yeah, at 6 months, he got into it with some of the adults in here and beat him up.
Yeah.
Really? At 6 months, he goes, yeah, he just overpowered him. He's so big. And he had this attitude, he was like absolute, not a punk, not going to take anything. Yeah. So I had that. So I had those genes in my dogs. And when I did it, the dog that I used was a dog called Vindicator. And Vindicator was a dog Jack had gotten a female from me off that big male I had. She was humongous, like 115 pounds. And he bred it to Bigfoot and produced this dog called Vindicator, which I bred him once or twice for myself and used him in my program. Now looking back, I should have used him a lot more. He was a really good dog. So I had the genes for the heavy, heavy color through Man of War. And so when I bought this Dinah, the black and white female, down the road, as the two outcrosses made their way into my pedigrees, I occasionally get a dog with a lot of color. I bred Dinah to my bully stud, a dog called Go Ballistic, who was a piebald dog with heavy red patches. And it produced this male. It was the only male in the litter. And he looked kind of standard, but he had a much thicker muzzle, heavier muzzle. And his name was Taz. And I used to call it Tuxedo. He looked like he had a tuxedo on. He had white feet, white neck, heavy black on his head, but he had a white muzzle. Mm-hmm. And so that dog turned out to be great. When he was like 9 months old, my friend and I loaded up him, my dog Shrek, and this dog I produced called Bear, who was older. We went to another friend of mine's house that did, it wasn't a hog trial or anything, but back then it was common for hog hunters to get together and have a huge pen and see whose dog will catch and kind of get their dogs taught about wild hogs before they go out and hunt with them. It was, now I guess it's illegal. Nobody does it, but back then it was, normal. And so we took him to this little trial, and the two older dogs did good, but this dog Taz did fantastic. Like I had hog hunters coming up to me, you want to sell that dog? I'm like, he's only 9 months old. He's got it. He looked like we let him go, and he was so hyped up. He was kind of a super smart dog, and it looked like there was a super magnet attached to his mouth and that hog's jowls. I mean, it was just like instantaneously he grabbed the hog. He caught like 3 hogs that day, and he was just a good dog. He wasn't the prettiest dog. He was kind of lanky looking, rangy. He was a big dog, but he didn't look big if you saw him, in a picture.
Right.
And so he proved a lot of things to us. He was a high quality dog, but not a dog. I was a real big time into the bully type and look back then. And he was, people that like bully dogs, he was the anti-bully. So I didn't use him a lot, but every freaking time I bred him, he produced heavy black, like as much as he had or sometimes more, where they just had paws that were white, a chest, a little bit on their neck and a little bit on their muzzle, or maybe just a little blaze. So, the first ones I produced, they weren't, it's an outcross. So they weren't, and I was taking standard blood to bully blood. So you're not going to get this two opposing types of head, type, muzzle.
Right.
So you're not going to get crazy consistency. And Mother Nature tends to go to what is more natural and healthy. So the first couple ones I produced, I had a dog called Bonsai that was off of him. And she was heavy color like that. She wasn't really a big dog, but she had the best temperament and she could breathe. We used to joke she could breathe underwater. She was just any kind of heat. You could work her and do anything, and she just cool herself down, no problem.
Right.
Since she was only 65 pounds, maybe not a good looking dog. So I never took a ton of pictures of her or anything. Now my other friend had her sister, a black bitch called Blaze, and we bred to her and tried to get stuff off of her, but her stuff didn't seem to work out as much. And Blaze was a little bit of a psycho. Like I think she got it more from the bully side. Like when you worked her or did anything, she'd get so freaking excited. She'd start hanging from chain link fences out of frustration. She was just a little too over the top.
Yeah.
So I bred Bonsai to an inbred male I had called Shrek and produced a nice litter. It was a couple, white dogs, couple red dogs, couple black dogs. And once again, the best pup in the litter was heavy black. And that was a female I had called Monella. And Monella was nice. She was a nice dog, but she wasn't, perfect structure. She was decent. She was a good dog. She wasn't the structure that I dreamed about or anything like that. But she had everything. She checked all the boxes. So anyway, and I had other dogs too, but they just didn't make as much of an impact as this Monella did. Well, meanwhile, I had an inbred male that I'd sold to a guy, and he was showing him. He was a show dog guy, and this dog didn't have black. He was a white dog. He was inbred that go ballistic dog. So he had a little bit of the man of war blood in him, but not the black stuff. Okay. And so anyway, this dog, his name was BMJ, became a dual grand champion, everything. And but before that happened, the guy that had him was a bully guy, and he was a show dog guy at the time, and he was all about the type and the look. And BMJ at the time, a lot of my dogs that are real muscular, some of them kind of grow up weedy looking and low body fat. They don't look like anything. And then they start putting on the muscle when they hit sexual maturity, and it changes their look totally. Well, they had just had a baby, and then they had some other dogs they thought would be better for bully type and showing. So he's like, I'm just going to give him back to you. And at the time I was thrilled because the brother to him that I kept, I kind of got weaseled out of him by this guy that came over and worked him. He was a big trainer from Vancouver. And I told him, I'll only sell it to you if you don't get a title on the dog, or for any reason he doesn't work out, he comes right back to me. Oh yeah. So he gets the dog. Then I find out he trained him for personal protection and sold him for $5,000 to somebody or something.
Really?
So anyway, I was so happy to get BMJ back. And honestly, I didn't put very much thought into anything. I was kind of high. The dog was 11 months old, and the things that I saw in him were things that I've been dreaming about. Really good structure, all 4 feet point forward, tight shoulders, just an athletic build. And he had a beautiful bully head. He was just a beautiful, clean dog. And he was inbred on my dog, Go Ballistic. So as soon as I got him back, and he was like 13 months old or so, I'm like, I can't wait. The next bitch that comes to feet, I put that much thought into it, to be honest with you. Usually I think long and hard and go over the pedigrees and go over the defects and go over the hip tests and all kinds of stuff on the dogs and decide, not going to do this. I didn't care. I was like, the first bitch that comes in heat. I can't wait to breed this dog.
Yeah.
So the first one to come in heat was this black dog, Monella. And I like Monella, but she wasn't my superstar. I was like, yeah, I've got to work on that black line of dogs a little more. I didn't want a black line of dogs. I just did it for an outcross. I didn't do it for the color, but I kept getting heavy black color. Well, long story short, we bred them together. They had 7 pups. The 2 mainly white dogs died like within the first hour of life. And then all that was left were 2 heavy red colored dogs and 3 heavy black colored dogs.
Wow.
And when they were 5-6 weeks old, I started noticing, I'm like, wow, these puppies have a different constitution to them. Like they're very tight and they're very coordinated and they're structured. They just look like adults. They can run and jump and they stop. They look like they stack themselves. And so meanwhile, the guy that used to have BMJ, the dogs that he had kept for show had all crapped out, bad hips. He had one that had some kind of problem, neurological problem. So him and his wife are missing BMJ. And he's like, we love him. We'd love to get him back and blah, blah, blah. Plus, BMJ had matured and he totally muscled up. And everything I'd been telling him and other people, hey, wait, he's just a baby. Wait till he pops. Wait till he puts on the muscle. And so he put on the muscle. He looked really good. And, he was all excited and was like, what are you going to do with these dogs? Well, I was going to do the same thing I'd been doing the last generations of these heavy colored dogs. Like, I'm just going to sell the heavy colored ones. I'll keep 2.
Fell out.
I was going to keep these 2 black dogs, this female Gracie and this male Huggy. There was a big red male in there. It was real nice, but I thought he was kind of cowhocked as a puppy. And then there was a red girl that was perfect, like beautifully structured, but she was kind of little. There was a black female that was real big. So anyway, he's like, hey, I said, I'm just going to sell those 3. He said, well, what are you selling for? I'm like, $500, whatever. I don't get papers. They're just going to be pets to somebody. And I'll keep these 2 and see. He goes, why don't we take the whole litter and place it? Long story short, we placed Huggy with the guy that's kind of like was really good friends with us. And he placed Gracie with a girl or somebody at the vet clinic that he would go to. And then an employee of somebody got this big red male called Butters. The other 2 went to these people. I can't remember who they are, but they reneged on the whole deal and spayed their females. So anyway, Huggy and Gracie and Butters, that litter just clicked. It clicked, and it was like, to me, it was like a new benchmark for me in structure, muscle, movement, tight, just very tight, like a performance style dog, but way more bulky muscle to them. And much cleaner dogs than what the regular bully dogs were. And all of a sudden, the black dogs weren't just okay. Huggy was just incredible. And Gracie was like, she wasn't quite as typey as the other ones in the head and stuff, but like she's the first black bully female champion ever in the history of the breed. And she championed out, like literally, he picked her up from this girl who kept her as a pet and had 0 training, 0 stacking, nothing, just walk in the show ring and just a controversial dog at the time in the bully ring, heavy colored black dog like that, just walk away with best in shows all the time, just effortlessly.
Wow.
And not just the structure, the movement was just tight and just awesome. It just clicked. Those 2 just clicked. And of course, I could say, I engineered the whole thing, but it really was just stupid luck. It was just the universe was looking out for me, because I didn't, like I said, I put 0 thought. It was like I was so jacked up about BMJ that I just wanted to breed him, and I was going to breed him to the first bitch I had.
Right.
So at first I was like, don't publicize these dogs. Let's see what they look. And then they looked great. So he took them to show, and then they started showing video of Huggy. And Huggy was maybe, to me, looks wise, he was better than Gracie. he just had it. He's the dog in the pictures I sent you. It's hard to distinguish him from his son, Gaucho. So those dogs changed. I used to have this saying, and people hate me for it. Change the game. They did change the game, because back then you would never have a heavy colored black or heavy colored brindle or red bully type American Bulldog, Johnson Classic, whatever you want to call it. And those dogs created a lot of people wanted that look and wanted those dogs. So at first, like everything, at first everybody talks shit. Oh, that Vito, he's crossing Staffordshire Bull Terrier in there, and greyhounds and pit bulls, bull mastiffs. They name it. You name it, everything.
Yeah.
And it's just like anything. When you do something, when you got something that's a little superior, and other people feel how they're going to catch up without breeding to your blood, they demonize you. They'll talk shit forever. And human nature is weird. Like if you get 15 people saying, you know what, Vito's a great guy, never done me wrong, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. But you get one guy that says Vito's the devil. I saw Vito slapping grandmas in the face.
Yeah.
They're like, I knew it. People.
They'll
I don't know
follow.
what it is. People want to hear. They believe negative comments before they believe positive.
They do.
So that caused a whole ruckus. And years later, some of the same people that talked all the shit are breeding exclusively colored dogs.
Yeah.
Not just from my blood, because like I said, by now this is we're 17 years, 16, 17 years, no, 20, 25 years later. We got guys, and this is negative. Anytime you breed, you select for anything cosmetic over what's important. There is an element in the breed now that they select on the color. A lot of American Bulldog guys or breeders are also the bully type guys, also bred Frenchies. That whole Frenchie craze where people they'll call me and say, "Are you KYTT or whatever?" I'm like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I don't
know what the hell you just said. What you?
Yeah, I don't test for color. I could give a shit. I know the basics of what might be produced, but I used to tell people in the beginning all the time, they want to pick a puppy and they'd be like, "Oh no, I don't want a dog with any black around its eye, or I want a dog that's red, or I want a dog." I'm like, you're missing the point. In American Bulldogs, you could get a white dog that's got no color, that's got structure and muscle, and it's got everything, and you're gonna love it, not because of the color. And you can get a dog that's the most unique color, and it's garbage.
Yeah,
I'll give an example. I won't name the guy's name, but there's a guy that he used to talk shit about my colored dogs, and probably the last 15 years, that's all he does is breed chocolates, lilacs, blues, blacks.
Yeah.
And I was on Facebook and I saw this dog. I'm like, oh, geez, what the fuck? It really looked like a science experiment gone bad. Like some genetic garbage got flushed on the toilet and went into that dog. I mean, the scraggliest looking bitch you've ever seen, with the weird looking head, little pinhead, little Beetlejuice looking head, wrinkles and big round eyes, and just frail looking, and just horrible structure. And I read the thing and it's like, this female's one of the only lilac females. And he did a breeding. Thank God it didn't take. I don't think it took. And I got this breeding, get in line, and I'm like, oh my God. The dog's lilac. If that means something, great. But other than that, the dog is horrendous.
Yeah.
Like I'd have been so embarrassed to even show the dog to anybody. And they're trying to sell them for $3,000 or $4,000 a puppy or some stupid thing because it's got that color. And I think people will end up realizing that,
Yeah.
You can have some funky color, and I'm sure that goes with anything. In American Bullies, they have those merles. Everything's a big thing about merle. A color can make a dog look cool. It's a cool paint job. But if it doesn't have a good body and it's not structured well or anything, it's not worth the crap. And then
Right.
what's really important is the dog's character and grit, if it's a bulldog, and working ability and personality, willingness to want to do stuff for you. That's what should be the most important. But
right.
So after those dogs, Huggy was bred to a female. I had a female, once again, I bred this dog Shrek, and he was a good dog. He was a little too hyper. Like, he was a 110-pound dog, and like, he had two speeds: sleep and bouncing off the walls, and just kind of stupid. He was a little weird, short-backed, very thick bone. He loved me, and I could handle him just fine. But once he got to a certain age, everybody came to my yard, all my friends from out of town and stuff. Oh man, I want to see him. So he'd go into his yard, and he'd get excited, and I couldn't figure out why he was doing it. And I had one friend that was like, he's like a steroid freak bodybuilder guy, and it was wintertime. He had one of these big overcoat things, like a cowboy Marlboro man. It had like wings on it, big, thick overcoat, because it's freezing outside. And he goes in there, and he's all, this guy was into game dogs and all kinds of stuff. I don't know why Shrek started getting so excited. He'd jump up and grab the guy's shoulder of his coat. And then if the guy pushed him away or something, then he grabbed the jeans next, on his knee. And eventually he'd try to pull the guy, and he would pull him to the ground. But he wouldn't attack the guy. But he was like, he was constant. He wanted to grab the guy. I don't know what it was. And I thought, well, he's a little inbred. Maybe he's a little stupid. I don't know. But it got to the point where I was a little afraid. I thought, I don't want to produce dogs like this.
Right.
He's friendly, and I'm sure he's the type of dog with his family. He'd always be cool. But with strangers, there was a dog behavioralist that had some of my dogs, that I asked him about it. And he said, yeah, he's so gung-ho and hyper, he just would go through the checklist of what he wants to do to be dominant or something, which I couldn't get it. So that dog, I bred him, but not as much, probably not as much as I should have, because I never saw that in anything else. And so anyway, I produced this dog. I produced 3 pups in this litter. I sold the best female. Oh, I had kept the best female, and I checked her hips or something, or no, her elbows, and they weren't good enough. So I sold it to a guy that I knew in New York. And I had a male that was real nice. He was a little cowhocked, and I couldn't stand that back then. I couldn't get over that. And then I had this female that I thought was a little scraggly, nothing. And I'd sold it to this girl in Illinois. Anyway, so the male I ended up selling to a Roman guy from Rome. He came over, and I wasn't going to keep the puppy. So I just called him Big Boy. Like, I get a pup, a lot of times I'll call, come here, Big Boy. And well, anyway, he's from Italy, so he didn't understand that. He thought that was the name I gave him, Big Boy, Big Boy. So he kept the name, Boy. Anyway, he gets the dog over there, and this guy turned out, I think he was loaded, had a lot of money, and he bought dogs from all over, and he was breeding the crap out of that dog to all kinds of dogs. And I was like, oh, don't breed to that, don't breed to that. And then they produced really well. Some phenomenal dogs that I never would have dreamed came out of that. Well, the scraggly female that I say scraggly, she wasn't that bad, but she just didn't trip my trigger. So I sold her to this goofy gal, and the gal kept complaining. I think there's something wrong with her kidneys or something. I'm like, what? I said, well, have you taken her to the vet? No, I don't want to spend all that money. She's real thin. She doesn't gain weight. She's just real skinny, and she's hyper. And I'm like, oh God, like Shrek. So long story short, I gave her a different dog and took the pup back at like 7 months or 6 months. And she was real thin, like very thin. So I'm like, oh shit. So I put her in a big yard with another dog, and she was hyper, unruly. The girl didn't teach her not to jump up on you and stuff. And she would drive me crazy because literally nobody told her no. Nobody taught her anything, any manners whatsoever. So I had a friend at my house at the time when I got the dog. And like a week later, he comes to my house. We're doing something. And he goes, "Hey, where's that female, that puppy?" And I said, "She's right over there." And he goes, "No way. It doesn't even look like her." I said, "I know." I said, "I've been free feeding her kibble, cheap kibble." And he's like, "It doesn't even look like the same dog." So I called the girl back and I said, "Hey, how much were you feeding her?" And she goes, "I was feeding her 2 cups a day, just like my adult dog." And I'm like, "You don't feed puppies the same as an adult. You know, puppies, they need to eat a lot more than an adult. It's why they have higher calorie food, like puppy food."
Right.
But she wasn't feeding the dog. And I took her to the vet, and the vet did a analysis on her urine because she had like a rash or something, and the vet said it's just from her licking herself. So anyway, that female, I raised her, and she's got huge. She was a big girl, and she was just like Shrek, but Shrek was taught by me, to have manners, and she didn't. And so the guy who had Huggy came for a visit, and he's like, "Wow, who's that female? She's huge." Because she was like 90-pound bitch, and she'd jump around like a ping pong ball, just like her dad. And I said, "If you want her, take her, breed her to Huggy." And I went to pick of the litter. So he took her, bred her to Huggy, produced Gaucho. Well, at the time, they didn't think, I didn't drive to Minnesota to go look at the puppies. I just relied on them. I ended up getting a female. They told me the males weren't anything. So anyway, this dog Gaucho, who looked just like Huggy, just a little bit bigger, he became the first black bully champion.
Oh, wow.
And they started breeding them at like 13 months old. They'd ship semen all over the place. There's frozen semen on them right now. The guy wants $4,500 for it. Wow. For a breeding. And so those dogs started the black bully type American Bulldog. Not all black American Bulldogs are related to my dogs. They have the other blacks crossed into, and some of them have a little bit of my blood, but not tons. So that's where the black American Bulldog came from. It was always there. It wasn't, there wasn't thousands of them. There were just a few, and you can see how it all kind of came about. That dog Aslan that I got, the black, came down from that dog. I found out years later that it kind of, I got the story in 2 parts. This is 10 years after I did the breeding, used that female. This dog Aslan, he was an exceptional dog too. Like that Kennel Aspen rare bred to him also. And they put him on a hog. They put him on men. He did all kinds of athletic things. He had a great temperament. Well, I found out that the guy that produced him had bought a female from a guy that was notorious for hanging papers up on the East Coast. And he said, yeah, the guy, he was an Italian guy. And he always drove a Coupe de Ville Cadillac. And he said, I met him at a gas station. And he hands me the puppy. And he said, oh. And he started going through a file and pulled out some papers and gave it to him. Well, the female turned out small, he said. She was real bully and smaller, and she was heavy colored red. So just because she was heavy colored red and the dog's pedigree red, mainly Johnson with a little bit of painter, he thought that was squirrely. And he didn't have any proof, but he thought that the dog had Levitt Oldie in it because this guy had Levitt Oldies too. And that was part of it. That was Aslan's mom. And then the other side, which I kind of knew that when I read the pedigree, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't, where's the black coming from? Because I know those dogs. I have never seen anything black from that. So then he tells me, well, what happened was I was in high school then. I was a kid. And right before I went into college, he said I'd take her to training up there to a place and we do protection work and all this stuff with my female. Right. And there was a guy that used to come in with this black and white dog. and the dog was like trained to like a Schutzhund title or something else, and it was personal protection. It was very well trained, beautiful dog, big dog. And I said, well, what did it look like? He said it looked like a standard dog, but he was black and white. But he was bigger than most standard dogs. Anyway, turns out that guy approached the guy who owned the training facility and said, hey, take my dog, please. I got to get out of here or I'm going to go on a long government vacation.
Wow.
And he left the dog there. And I don't know if the guy went to prison or I don't know what happened, but the guy got stuck with the dog. Well, these kids loved the dog. That guy loved that dog and worked him and did all kinds of stuff. And he said, hey, the guy's not coming back. You can take him. And he said, yeah, I went to college and we took that dog with us. And he said he was the coolest freaking dog. We used to have parties and he'd just hang out with us. And people would get drunk and put stickers all over him. And he said he just had the best temperament. I said, well, what was he? What do you think he was? He said, I think he was a standard American Bulldog with something else in him. So nobody really knows where that black came from. I'm not sure what that dog was.
Wow. Well,
so that's where the black came in that dog.
Okay. Yeah. So
but there's people, that they got a dog, they think they know everything. I'm like, there ain't no such thing as a black dog. Yeah. There is. There's no such thing as a white dog. There's white because somebody selected for it. There's no such thing as this. There's no such thing as that. It's all what you select for. And all this shit about purity. In a working dog, the only thing that determines purity is its ability to function true to type. People get confused with that word type. They think type is like the show dog people's idea of type is the look, the length of the tail, the ear set, the color pattern, all these cosmetic goofy stuff, But for thousands of years, purity was judged by performance, by it being its ability to do what it was bred to do. And if you ever read old English Bulldog books, they tell stories. There was a story of medieval England. Some guy came to a bull baiting match with a female that had a litter of pups that he was trying to sell. This is probably bullshit, but this might be a myth or exaggeration, but this is the thought process. And to prove how pure his female was, he sicked her on the bull. And when he grabbed her by the nose, he came up with a sword and cut off her back leg. And she kept holding on. What? And then he cut off another leg and she still held on. And then he cut her in half and she still held on. And that proved that those bulldogs were pure. Yeah. It's just like with pit bulls, with the game dogs. Nobody cared about a pit bull terrier, a fighting dog. They're either called a cur or they're called a bulldog. A cur is not considered. It might come out of the same litter as grand champion what's his face, but if he is a cur, he's not a bulldog. He's not even considered a dog. They don't consider him anything. He's just a cur. He's a piece of shit. No, you don't want to mess with that.
Right.
So their whole purity to them comes from ability.
Right.
And you can say whatever you want about game bred dogs and the whole practice and the whole history of cruelty and horribleness and all that, but you can't kill those suckers with a ball peen hammer. I mean, they are so tough and strong and clear-headed and smart and healthy. Most game dogs, if they were just kept as pets, you wouldn't be weird for you to keep one till 16, 17 years of age.
Right.
Same with border collies that were bred for work, and a lot of You look at Malinois. I'm not a big fan of Malinois. It's not my type of dog, but you can't argue with their athleticism, their trainability, their work ethic. And it didn't get that way from show breeders saying, we're going to have to get rid of her. Her ears aren't right. Her tail curls too much over the back. It was on ability. It was performance. That dog those dogs prove themselves.
Yeah, they throw a dog away about anything nowadays.
Yeah, it's even. I'd heard this years ago, and I finally asked somebody online that was into that KMVP sport dog stuff in Europe, and I'd heard that for years people would just bring dogs and compete, and they would, when it came to listing the breed, they would just put Dutch Shepherd, because for a little bit their Dutch Shepherds were a catch-all for whatever. And a lot of these dogs, the best dogs, were a little outcrossed. And I'd ask them, well, what do you mean a little outcrossed? What do they do? They said, well, and they take the Malinois, a good, perfect working Malinois. Maybe they're at the end of their genetic, they're pretty tight on this, and they cross in an American Bulldog or a Pit Bull, or he said Greyhound. And I'm like, well, why would you do that? What would you get? And they said, well, from American Bulldogs you get fight drive, from Pit Bulls you get a lot of stuff, especially insane prey drive and insane athletic ability. And Greyhounds, of course, racing Greyhounds don't really have any kind of disease problems, hip problems, joint problems. And that's a pretty absolute ancient breed that was bred purely on performance. They wouldn't breed a dog unless it won. And for it to win, it's got to run faster than the fastest of the fast. So a lot of those KMVP dogs, a lot of those European super champion working dogs, nowadays they don't even care. They just put mix or whatever. It doesn't matter. They're not worried about, purity. They're worried about performance.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And most people nowadays, they can't fathom any kind of thinking like that. And even 20 years ago, I would have been like, ugh, that's, that dog's not pure. But what is a pure dog? Pure what? Pure, I'd hate to dunk on Dobermans, but Doberman was my breed when I was a kid. My last Doberman, I had him all trained and everything. Went through so much to raise him, and he was a good dog, but he started just peeing. I'm like, what is going on? He was house trained and everything. He just started dripping. Well, it turned out he had this rare form of diabetes called diabetes insipidus. And the medicine was like $400 back in 1980 something. And the lady came back and told me this, and the vet, when she diagnosed him, and she was like I could see she was almost in tears. And I'm like, he's a beautiful dog. He's healthy. But she's like, no, we're gonna have to put him down. I'm like, what? He was like 2 years old, I think, maybe 3. And I'm like, I'm not putting him down. He's fine. He just pees a little bit. I'm gonna have to, keep him in a crate and when I'm, not at home. So a year went by, and I kept him on the landing. On the staircase going down to my house was all tile, and I just had beach tiles down. And then it got to the point where his pee turned like mustard. And I thought, oh, this isn't good. So I took him in. She goes, he's in kidney failure. And if you don't put him down right now, he could go through an episode and be very excruciating, for him. So I had to put him down. And I'd already kind of was in the outs, because a lot of the top Dobermans back then, they had thyroid issues. Almost all of them had the cardiomyopathy would pop up. You'd have a Doberman, you'd be running them in the woods, and all of a sudden he'd fall over dead. Never had anything. And it was this cardiomyopathy where their heart grows so big that the chambers are too small.
Right.
And they have von Willebrand's disease, which is, hemophiliacs. They cut themselves, they bleed out. And I can't imagine now, 30 years later, what they're like. I don't know. That was kind of, that breed kind of turned me away. That's why I went hunting for this rare breed. The American Bulldog back then was rare.
Yeah, I never see a Doberman nowadays. I just remember it growing up, seeing it in movies. It was a tough dog, like Charles Bronson,
Yeah, in
All
the
them back
70s,
in them days, yeah.
they were like a land shark. I
Yeah,
mean, people,
yeah,
I had them. People would cross the street.
yeah.
I have a lady, a friend of mine. She's a vet. She had a female, Hillary. I think she named her Hillary during the 2016 election. So I think she was like 2015 year, something like that. She just had to put her down like a year ago. She was not even 7 years old.
Oh,
And then
wow.
one of my sister's best friends, I knew she had a Doberman, but I didn't pay attention. And she told me, oh, they had to put that dog down. It was only 6 years old, 7 years old. They spent $30,000 on that dog. What the?
Yeah, I heard. I've been hearing they don't last past 7 years now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the problem is with the Doberman, because I know the history of the Doberman, it was a handful of dogs. It was one man that pretty much started that breed. And then people cross stuff into them to refine them. They have Great Dane,
Mhm.
Greyhound, German Pointer, uh, Weimaraner, Rottweiler, and some local Shepherd. So when they started out, even though the gene pool was small, it was so mixed and so diverse, it was okay. But now, all these years later, the gene pool is not that big. And then on top of that, in the 70s, when I was a kid, I'd go to these Doberman specialty shows, and it was bizarre. It was so weird. These women at the specialty shows would be wearing these long gowns and all this gold jewelry. And then when somebody win, they'd shake and cry. Oh. And I remember thinking to myself, what are these fucking people nuts? They're crazy.
Yeah.
And I started noticing, like in the early 70s, Doberman, I'd see Dobermans, they had like a thick neck and had like a big head, like a mailbox head. And they're a little bigger and thicker and rougher looking. And then by the 1980s, I'd go to these specialty shows and I'm like, what is that? A little chicken neck looking dog. And it's like these women, I hate to say just women, they're men too that did it, but back then it was $700 a weekend to get a handler to handle your dog. So that was expensive as hell back then. So
How
you
much
had to
was
have a
it?
lot of money. $700. Because I thought to myself, man, if I could, because there was that guy Andy Linton. He judged this female called Indy at the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show in 1992 or 94, one of the two, I can't remember. That guy used to have an 18-wheeler truck with a trailer full of dogs, and he had a crew of handlers, and they'd go from AKC show to AKC show and make that circuit. Well, you got $700 a dog a weekend plus expenses. You're making a pretty good living. Well, the thing was back then, you could not win in AKC with the Doberman if you didn't have the right professional handler. The judge wouldn't even look at you. So I'd go to these shows. I'm like, damn, that's the nicest dog. That's the nicest dog. And it wouldn't get picked. And I'd go over and talk to the people. And I remember there was a young couple, and I'm like, I don't understand. I don't get it. They said, oh, because they look at me and I'm a nobody. Those judges look at their friends who are these handlers, and they might not know the breed that well. And they're just like, if that guy's handling the dog, it's got to be great.
I'm sure it's the same today.
Yeah. Back in 1996, I think, I put the first American Bulldog show on here at Purina Farms in Missouri. And I'd been to a couple shows, and because I came from that Doberman show world, the American Bulldog was so different. They're not structured well. They move like shit. A lot of them were cowhocked, and it was all about their big heads. Their shoulders were real far forward and all this crap. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to put on this show, and I'm going to try to get some good AKC judges, professionals. So I called and talked to different people that I knew, and I wound up with these two people. One person was a Rhodesian Ridgeback breeder, and the other one was a lady that taught conformation dog, how to handle dog handler classes, and she bred Samoyeds. The Samoyed lady was fantastic. She knew what she was looking at. The other lady I was cringing because I'd hear her comment. And she'd be like, I love this female. She has such an elegant carriage. And I thought, elegant carriage, that's not a term I want to hear when you describe an American Bulldog.
Yeah.
Elegant carriage. And she picked the thin boned, funky looking females, and it made me think back in the 70s and 80s, these people that showed the Dobermans, they thought that those were Arabian horses, I think. Because they wanted these frail, weird looking dogs. And so the small gene pool and the fact that the dogs exploded in the show ring and popularity, and they were bred, with the stupid criteria, the selection pressure was all wrong. Whereas if you take and look at the Malinois, it wasn't a handful of dogs. It wasn't one guy. It was kind of, the development of the Malinois was kind of like a local mixed shepherd. And it was bred purely for the work, for herding or whatever it needed to be done. And so the rules were performance is what rules our selection. And if you take the Doberman, they took a hard-ass dog and with a limited gene pool, selected for funky stuff. And now we got all kinds of these problems. And that's just one example of many, many breeds that are like that. And it's going to happen to the American Bulldog if it hasn't already.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
People are fickle.
You was talking about the Rhodesian Ridgeback, and I went to a show about a month or two ago, and I think the first time I seen Rhodesian Ridgebacks, there was a lady had them, and them things were tall, they was long. Now you go to the shows, they look smaller to me.
Yeah, they were big dogs. They were a big hound.
Right.
They were supposed to be, they kind of have a parallel history to the Borbal.
Really?
I often wonder if it's the same variation of the same idea.
I wonder if they've been used too, sometimes in the board. They're going through a situation right now where they're getting, I think they just want people to be clear with them. You know how you said people add dogs all the time? And I think they just want people just tell us what we use, you know what I mean? But it don't happen like that.
I don't know that much about Borbals. I've had limited
well, they got new
exposure. I think the problem with them is same thing. I don't know this for a fact. I'm not deeply involved, but I just see the same kind of stuff. Borbals. There was a guy who is a friend of mine who's a big trainer here in St. Louis. Now he's out in Colorado. He's a top flight PSA decoy and trainer. Mm-hmm. Some retired football player, had a grass-fed beef cattle ranch here in Missouri, and he's from Atlanta. He had a place in Atlanta too. This guy had tons of money, and he bought this Borbal. And I saw it with my friend. I've never seen a dog. The dog had a head like a trash can lid. It had the heaviest bone I've ever seen on a dog. I think it was 160 pounds, and it was only like 26 inches, maybe 20, about 25 or 26 inches. The dog's name was Hendrix. I mean, this son of a bitch was huge. I mean, probably the biggest headed dog I've ever seen. Well, he went to my friend because the dog was scared of his own shadow. And the owner was like, I blame it on myself because he left him at the grass-fed beef ranch that he owns, and his dad lived there, and people that run the ranch kind of help raise the dog. And everybody was a little afraid of him, they said, because he would just growl. He was just so scared he'd growl. But if you pushed him or did anything to him, he'd just piss himself. Matter of fact, my friend had a dog for me called Puma. And Puma's like 90 pounds full grown. So this dog is 70 pounds less weight size than this dog Hendrix. And he beat the shit out of him. Like he pushed that dog around. The dog was scared of his own shadow. And I heard there was a guy there that was I don't know if it was the Borbal breeder or if it was a guy that was into Borbals. And I heard him talking to my friend and saying, "Oh, if you don't have at least 150, 140 pound Borbal stud, forget about it. You got nothing. You got, so it's all about size. And actually, years before that, there's a park not too far from my old house, and I was taking a dog up there just to walk and exercise. And I thought, what the hell are these English Mastiffs here for? And I looked, I said, well, that's not an English Mastiff. So I put my dog up and I walked over and I'm like, what are these? They said, well, this is a Borbal appraisal. Ah, okay. That's weird. A Borbal appraisal. I said, what does that mean? So they told me, yeah, we rate the dog, blah, blah, blah. So I see these guys. One guy was from South Africa. They brought him from South Africa to do this. And I'm looking at one. I thought, well, that looks like a big American Bulldog that's colored like a boxer. And then that one looks like an English Mastiff. It just looks so different. And I thought, there's no way that dog's fighting, baboons to keep them away from your livestock. That dog is a fat English Mastiff, like 180-pound dog. It's just laying on the ground with his tongue unraveled. So I have a feeling, and this is just limited. I don't know anything about Borbals. I'm not even into them. But just that, to me, that's like, oh shit. If your stud's not worth a shit, if he's not oversized, they can't convince me that a 180-pound dog is running around Africa fighting lions. No, I don't care if they're in a pack. I don't care what they're in. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I have another friend he is a trainer here in St. Louis. He does personal protection training. He does more real life stuff. And he had this Borbal I saw at one of the little trials or events that he had. It was a good looking dog. It was like probably 120 pounds, but beautifully structured. And he said, yeah, no, I'm finding a home for him because he just crumbles. Like if you put any pressure on him, he crumbles. And this guy's pretty hard. Like his idea of a good dog is like more than most people can handle.
Right.
He's all personal protection. So he wants a dog that will kill somebody.
Yeah.
He wants somebody that's for real. But nobody's going to get to you. That dog is not going to let you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my little bit limited, but that's the same with every dog, every breed of dog. There needs to be a change of thinking in this whole term purebred, breed. Oh, my dog's pure. A lot of them, I don't care. Your dog is pure shit. Yeah. I can, I look at it, it's pure shit. Its tail's tucked so far up its ass. That's like if you had a Malinois that would piss himself.
Yeah.
And it's in the other extreme now. I mean, some of these dogs are too much for most people. Too much for me. My friend, I was telling you, when he moved to Colorado, he was like, is there any way you could keep my Malinois female? Well, I know that female. It's like, holy shit. She was, I don't know, PS 75 or I don't know what the hell title she had, but she was so sharp that like when I'd go in to clean her kennel and do stuff, I'd have to have like 5 tennis balls in my pocket. And I'd have to constantly just once I'd throw the tennis ball, she'd go get it, bring it back. But if I didn't give her something to do, I don't know, she never bit me, but she was all over it. She was like, I don't have kids or people out to my house that much, but I did have some friends that would come out. One guy that worked for me that had little kids. And I didn't like the way she was looking at those kids through the fence. So I'd put up signs and I put an extra strand of wire around her kennel while I had her. She never did anything, but.
Right. But when you get that feeling like, you better heed it.
And I've been exposed to a lot of extreme stuff. Like here in St. Louis, where my friend used to be the teacher of this, there's a school called the Tom Rose School. And Tom Rose had these Malinois, and I think he went to Europe and won. And he had this one, these trainers would always tell the story of this. I think the dog's name was Stewie or Stu. And the dog loved to bite people so much, he'd come up and act friendly to you, and then when you start petting him, he'd just bite you.
Damn.
And, Malinois don't nip. They're right. They're about to kill you.
Right.
So a lot of the sport dog guys, maybe, I don't know, they just want such a sharp dog.
Yeah.
You got to know what you're
But
doing.
yeah, they got to be some really good um identifiers of people who would need their dogs. They probably heavy with other dog people, man, because it seems like them type dogs will be hard to place.
Yeah, that's my worst nightmare. I don't like dogs like that at all. I like American Bulldogs that will let kids crawl all over them. And I had a dog that was returned to me over 20 years ago, Monty, the full Monty, and he was a cool dog. When he was like 5, I sold him to a guy up in Canada, and I don't know what this guy's psychological issue is, but at the time, he's like hyper goofy about everything. Oh, he complained about something one day, the next day he was telling me, oh, this dog pees all the time in his kennel. I said, well, do you let him out a lot? Because I knew he was in Canada and it was wintertime and it was bad. And yes, I do. And then he comes right in and pees. And I'm like, that's weird. I said, well, take him to the vet. Maybe he's got some kind of a bladder disease. It just went from one thing to another to another. And I think, long story short, was he got it in his head that this dog wasn't going to work out. It wasn't going to be a good dog. And so he returned the dog to me. In like 5 months, I went to a dog show in Alabama, a big American Bulldog show, and he went there too. He brought me the dog, and I saw he pulled the dog out of his van, and this 5-month-old little puppy, this guy's knuckles were white holding that leash. He was holding the leash like he had a hyena on the leash or something. And so the dog was a little standoffish, and he kind of barked and growled a little bit at me. But he was a 5-month-old puppy. So I walk up and, Bonnie, what are you doing? As soon as I did that, he's shaking his whole body and this and that. And I took him and I brought him home. And I had some friends from Colorado that went to that show too. On the way back, they stopped at my house to sleep over, and then they were going to drive the rest of the way. Well, they're world-class trainers, and they did weight pull and all kinds of stuff with dogs. And so I told them, and they had a little niece that was with them that was like 7 years old or 6 years old. So I'm like, hey, I get this dog back. This guy tells me the dog's nuts. He said that when he was going through customs, somebody walked by the van and he'd just lunge himself at the window and try to get at him. And I'm like, well, the dog's 5 months old. Just tell him to stop. And so I get this dog, Monty. They test him, and they're like, videotape it. So back then I had a big old VCR thing. Like when you recorded stuff, it was a big giant camcorder.
Right.
And I recorded it. I put it online. I'm like, and they were like, I just don't see it. And this little girl is hugging on the puppy and kissing him and petting him and all this stuff. So then I actually went to that Tom Rose school. That was before I knew anybody there. And I asked him, I said, how much would you charge me to temperament test this puppy and tell me what you think? And I'm going to videotape it. He says, I won't charge you nothing. So I had him tie him to a post, and he came up with clatter sticks and, empty plastic jugs with rocks and threw them at him. And I said, what do you think? And he says, well, I think he's a little sporty, but I don't see that he's crazy. I don't see anything weird about him. So it just goes, some people, their idea of what it is. Well, it turns out that dog he told everybody in the breed that the dog was unstable and that I bred a piece of shit dog that would, it's dangerous, should be put down. He wanted me to put the dog down.
Wow. Yeah.
So he ended up with this guy. He was the son of this dog called Mufasa. It was pretty famous. He hadn't been famous yet, but the guy that owned him was a good friend of mine, Kenny. And he's like, I'll take him. We'll find him a good home. You'll find a place. And he said, I don't understand that guy. And so there's a guy who was a trainer in Illinois, and this guy was not a professional trainer, but he trained American Bulldogs before. And so he saw him and he wanted him. So he called me and said, do you care if this guy has him? I said, no, I don't care. That guy had 4 little boys. And I found out later that they were pretty bad little boys. So anyway, he calls me, I don't know, a year later, and he goes, man, I can give you a good testament on Monty. And I said, really? What's up? He goes, well, he said, my 4 sons, they play with them all day and do stuff with them. And they're little rascals. Well, they shoved a pencil up his ass and broke the pencil. Whoa. And it just was in to the sphincter a little bit, and there's splinters. So, but they could crawl on top of them and do whatever they want to. But they told my wife, and he said when my wife would get close to Monty's ass, he would snap at her, like, get away from it, you know. But the kids could do anything to him. He said, I had to take the dog to the vet, and they had to sedate him and take that out in pieces. And he said, yeah, these were splintered into his sphincter, and it had to be excruciating pain. Yeah. But he wouldn't bite those kids, the crazy dog that should have been put down. Yeah. So it that's the kind of temperament I want.
That's right.
I mean, right. I like a drivey dog and a dog that will work and wants to do stuff for you, but I don't want a dog that's any liability that would ever bite a child or anybody that's not doing anything bad.
I'm 100% with you on that. Yes, sir. Yep. Well, Vito, we done it again.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully this gets more play than the last time I did it, but of course, as soon as people will be in the comments saying, "Oh, this guy's crazy."
Oh, yeah. Oh man. Oh.
Black means there's pit bull in there. Blue means there's pit.
They won't be in the comments. They won't just be in the comments. They'll be messaging me. He lying.
Yeah. Well, those are facts. Those are. I mean, who knows? But somebody could cross anything. And I mean, there's been so many dogs crossed into American Bulldogs that a lot of the bully people don't. They may know it and they don't care. Because it's an English Bulldog or an Old English Bulldog or some crap like that.
That's what a lot of dogs. And the best people that know is the people who don't know, because you know why? They come up there and ask you those questions like, is that Great Dane in your dog? Is that a pit bull in your dog? They see it.
I was guilty of it too. Probably when I started out in American Bulldogs, I'd see those solid colored black mask standard dogs. And I was like, how much pit bull are they putting in here? Because when you're not that knowledgeable, you just look at colors. Yeah. Like I used to have a dog that was the best working dog I ever produced. Second best. His son was probably better than him. He was a proven catch dog, and he was red, had a little black on, not a mask, but a little black on his muzzle. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the flashiest, but he was a great catch dog. He caught hundreds of hogs. And hunted any time of the year, never had problems. Everything about the dog had incredibly tight hips. His pen hip was 2.7, 2.8. And I'd post a picture of him, and I'd get all kinds of stuff. I had one girl from England who'd been into American Bulldogs. I see a lot of Rhodesian Ridgeback, and I'm like, are you stoned? Or I'd have people say boxer, all kinds of dumb things. Right. I had a dog at my house from, it wasn't a dog I produced. It was a bullhead dog, a standard bullhead dog. And she was all red, real muscled, nice. One of the hog hunters that I knew, I talked to him and he had her. And then I forget, he moved or something. And so I had her for a while. And anyway, I had to keep her on a chain. So she was on a chain next to my driveway. I had some guy claimed he was from out of town. Well, I think he was from out of town, and he was in St. Louis for something at work, and he wanted to come out and see my dogs. I showed him all my dog. We walked the whole property, talked for a long time, nice as can be. Then he got in his car, and in my driveway kind of was turning around, and as he was pulling out of my driveway, this asshole turns to me and he looks at Ginger, the female that I had chained up. That's not even part of my program. I didn't produce a dog. It was a bullhead dog. And he goes, that's a freaking pit bull boxer. To you bullshit. And pairs off before I can even say anything. I thought, some people are such assholes. But I think that's part of it's part of dog people.
Oh, yeah.
We just know everything, I was the same way. I was like, shit, I know that. I can see that. I can see this. I can see
this. Yeah. Well, Vito, it's been real, brother.
Alrighty. Yeah. Once again, thanks again.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time. If ever you got something you want to say, hit me up, brother.
Alrighty. Sounds good.
My audience loves you.
All right.
Okay.
You take it easy.
We'll see you. Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of NWA Connie Corsos. Thank you for being a part of our Connie Corso community. Remember, you can stay connected with us beyond the podcast. Find us on all major media platforms by searching for NWA Cane Corsos. Whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, just hit that follow button to join the conversation and get the latest updates. If you have a burning question or want to apply to be a guest on our show, we'd love to hear from you. Simply shoot us an email at nwacanecorsos@gmail.com. And if you're a business interested in becoming a sponsor, reach out to us at the same email address. For more resources, exclusive content, and links to all our social media profiles, visit our website at nwacanecorsos.com. It's your go-to destination for everything dogs. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we can't wait to bring you more exciting episodes where we explore the fascinating world of dogs.